Welcome and thank you for watching Land and Property Focus. I am Nana Otu Turkson, a surveyor and a barrister, and I'm your host for this show. The show will provide an educative and detailed insight into land and property sector in Ghana with the hope that you would learn, discuss, and be empowered. If you're watching on Facebook, please share. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do subscribe to the channel. As well, do post your comments, questions, opinions, so that we can interact with you. The program is in 3 parts. The first, where I take you through mostly a summarized version of relevant provisions of the law, which feeds into the topic to be discussed. The second is a discussion where, together with my guest, we discuss the law, the topic of the day. We would conclude by giving you lessons to take away, advice and guidance so that you can use as and when necessary. Today's topic, as you may be aware, is what land can I buy? And I have 2 distinguished professionals who will be joining me in a few minutes' time. The final part is for you. It is an opportunity for you to ask any questions through Facebook or YouTube. Your questions can be on any land and property subject and should not necessarily relate to today's law or topic or discussion. Without much ado, I will turn on to our first law session, which would feed in obviously into the discussion as I've mentioned. So we're taking our law today from the 1992 Constitution, being that it is the supreme law of the land, and we're turning first to Article 266, 1, 2, and 4, which I have summarized, and this provision of the Constitution thus does relate to non-citizens and owning of land in Ghana. So essentially it's summed as a non-citizen can only buy land on leases, which last not more than 50 years at any one time. Any agreement which is different from this is not valid. Then we tend to look at Article 267, and I have summed parts 1, 3 to 5. And this part of the Constitution relates to stool and skin land property. Stool land shall be controlled by the stool, that is the chiefs, the skins, and those who control the communities on behalf of the natives in accordance with their traditions. It shall not be developed or sold unless the Lands Commission is satisfied that it meets town planning rules. Any disagreement with the Lands Commission is settled at the High Court, and no stool land can be sold freehold. So these are the main laws that I have chosen for our discussion today, and which is going to feed into our discussion. So welcome, Mr. Badu and Mr. Gyan Manu, who are my professional experts today joining us. Mr. Badu joining us from Accra, and Mr. Manu joining us from Virginia. Thank you very much for joining today. Mr. Manu, I don't know if you have something little to say before we start.
Sure. Thank you, viewers and listeners. And thanks, Nana Otu, for inviting us to the show. It's a privilege to be here. We're excited about the program and look forward to discussions with your listeners and viewers. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Badu, do you have a few words? It looks like we are having a bit of an issue with Mr. Badu, but we will try and move on. And once he comes on, I guess we can continue from there. So essentially, we have discussed an issue concerning the the land holding as the Constitution of Ghana provides for. Mr. Badu, can you hear us? Hello?
I can hear you now.
Okay, all right. So I was just welcoming you to the show. So if you have anything to say briefly before we go on. Okay. I think we would struggle with Mr. Bedu's feed, and so I would proceed with Mr. Manu on this so that we can treat this subject with dispatch. So in terms of the part of the Constitution that talks about non-citizens owning land, obviously it restricts this to 50 years. And I think it's something that not a lot of people are aware of, but it is not disadvantageous as such as compared to what citizens can obtain, because there are places in Accra now where lands are being sold on 50-year leases, and also in the Ashanti region, as I've heard. So I presume that on that score, the citizens and non-citizens can all be or are most likely going to trade in the same market at the same for the same number of years. So, Mr. Manu, perhaps I'll throw this question to you. As an architect, do you have a consideration for what term or what the ownership structure of a client is before you do design for them? And if not, why not?
Yes. Thank you very much, Nana. This is very, very, very important. The reason why I say this is very important is that obviously you cannot design without land. You know, when we some people quote unquote when we do architecture, 99% of the time it's on land. Even if you're going to develop something on water, it still has to be a fixed and finite location, and this is determined by you know, getting the type of land that you want. Where are you getting it from? What governmental agencies?
Hello.
Yep. Sorry. You can continue, Mr. Jamenu.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah. So the when we are beginning, or we are approached by a client, the most important question we ask the client is, do you have landed property? Do you have a site plan? Before we go into what we call your design program or your brief. Because what happens is that every client that comes to an architect has some type of vision in their head as to what they want to do. It could be very personal, meaning that they want to build for the architect to design their dream home for them for their own personal use. It could be that they want other types of residential buildings, and that for commercial purposes like apartments, or it could be for industrial purposes, and also institutional, being churches, and maybe commercialization purposes like a petrol filling station and stuff like that. So the reason why it is critical to know what type of lease you have, or what type of ownership you have, whether it's leasehold or freehold, is when you come to an architect and you tell the architect that, oh, I am a non-citizen. I want to come, I want to purchase this land with the sole purpose of building these or this magnificent home that I'm going to transfer to my kids for generation to generation. Then I can say, hold on there. Do you realize that your lease is only for 50 years? That right there and there can change the conversation altogether. You understand? Because sometimes clients are not aware of these things. Now, let's say you are a non-citizen. You're just coming in to invest, right? So you're there in the country for 25 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. When you come in and ask the architect, we can tell you that, okay, for the purposes of what you're trying to do, Leasehold for 50 years is perfect. You do your stuff, is what do you call it, a gas station or is a commercial center in 20, 30 years. Of course, you would have worked with a bunch of people, you know, a bunch of professionals. You're talking about an architect, you're talking about Mr. Steven Badu, a lawyer, you're talking about an accountant, someone who's done the market analysis and research. You understand? So then
So
in putting all of this together, we can advise you that, okay, look, since you cannot own, you can only lease property for only 50 years, these are the areas that you can design, or these types of design will be more beneficial to you, instead of an apartment complex that you think in your head that you would own for the rest of your life and hand over to your progeny. Maybe you just go into a filling station, you know, cash in 20, 30 years. The rest of the 20 years is some people will say jara, and then after that, hey, if you're able to renew the lease, all well and good. If not,
okay,
you're good. So
thank
let
you
me put
very
it
much.
here for now.
Yeah, I think it's been very clear what you've passed on. And Mr. Bedu, I don't know if you can hear us now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so for you, I think the first question that I was going to throw to you was obviously knowing about the situation of the non-citizens and what they can acquire, and the fact that citizens have a bar on acquiring freehold. The first question I wanted to put to you was, what is the difference between a leasehold and a freehold, and why does it matter? You know, just a few words, really.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So a freehold and a leasehold both are interest in land. Okay. A freehold is an interest in land which is indefinite. Okay, it's indeterminate. I don't know how to simply explain it for our audience to understand. As my lecturer would say, it is free forever. Once you have it, unless maybe something happens, you are unable to meet certain terms, you have it forever. And maybe until, say, your succession fails. I mean, there's nobody to succeed you when you pass on, which of course can never be the case, because even whilst you're alive, you can dispose it of. So once you have a freehold, you have interest for life. You have it for life. For a leasehold is also an interest in land, but this one is created to last for a fixed term. So there's a beginning and then an end. It can be for a year or up to 99 years.
Okay.
And once the term comes to an end, if you don't have any renewal clause, then it reverts to the original owner. So that's basically the difference between the two.
Okay, so in terms of the change in the law for the 1992 Constitution, where the freeholds, and I think this has been on the books for a while, but perhaps not codified, because I think Professor Akwe mentioned this sometime in the 70s in one of his commentary about the fact that we had to codify the stopping of the sale of freeholds. So what was the reason? Can you give us what the basic reason was why for stool lands, freeholds are not allowed to be sold?
Okay, as I explained, freehold, once the land is alienated, okay, or sold, it's gone forever. Okay, there's no way the stool can reacquire it. All right, and don't forget, land is supposed to be for the benefit of those who are living, and then several generations are born. So if the law doesn't protect this land, the ownership of this land, in no time it will be disposed of and the family will have no land. Okay, so that's why the Constitution bars the sale of freehold land, or the creation of freehold land interest out of stool land.
Okay, so I guess I'll throw this back to Architect Gyan Manu. If
Yes, sir.
briefly, do you agree with this? Because I know in professional circles, when I have had this discussion with a number of people, it's not everybody who is comfortable about it, because generally the world over, land is available freehold.
Yeah.
But I guess in our case, we find a special reason why, because land is part of our culture, land is part of our custom,
Mhm.
land is part of our soul, or that is what we believe as a people. And that is why lawyer Badu has talked about the fact that it belongs to those who are dead, those who are living, and those yet unborn. Whoever is the head of the family now has a right just to hold it now, perhaps make some income out of it, but you don't have a right to sell it, because if whoever came before you sold it, you wouldn't have come to meet anything to sell. So it is in that wisdom that this scheme is there. But what is your view, Architect Manu? What is your view about this? Do you think this is something that's workable or that's acceptable?
I would say that this is one of the few things that, being a proud Ghanaian and being very proud of my culture, this is one of the few things that I think Nananom and Co missed the mark on. You understand? Because, and I'll explain. It's a global economy right now. You understand? Back in the days when we were living in clans and tribes, and that's not the case right now. You know, you take up, once you look at us on the panel right now. I'm in the US, you are in Bermuda, Stephen is in Ghana. You understand? I think 50 years of putting restrictions on non-citizens, and bear in mind that some Ghanaians evolve to become non-citizens. You know what I mean, right? Putting this or placing these restrictions, I think, limits our ability in terms of economic ability, developmental ability. You understand? Because if and on the flip side, based off of what I see, everything we get from foreign, you understand, we get from outside. Oh, I won't say everything, that's too broad, but like we do get a chunk of everything that is in the country Ghana from outside. When I say everything, I'm talking about products, even the food that we eat, everything. You know, there's some form of global interaction that is going on. Placing a finite number, which in my opinion, in this case, 50 years, I think is very, very low. You understand? Because if look at these young millionaires and young billionaires who are coming up. They're because of IT and stuff, we're having billionaires who are 18 years old, 19 years old. So if I really, genuinely have an interest in a developmental interest in Ghana or Africa. Right now, we all know that Africa and Ghana is the global beacon, and they have all these kinds of accolades, gates of the whatever, center of the world. And I want to come and invest billions in Ghana, and I have to acquire property there. And you're telling me that I have only 50 years. If my board, I'm only 20 years, and my board comes to me and tells me that, Mr. Manu, this investment, there's this country here in Ghana, it looks very promising, but guess what? You can only buy property or lease property for 50 years. So when you are 70, and hopefully, if I have enough money and God doesn't strike me dead, I'll be in good health and I should live to 80 or 90 or whatever, right? And there's country B, which allows you to either a much a less stiffer lease term or freehold. Why don't I go there? So I think Ghana stands to lose if we don't amend these laws. That's what I'll say for now.
Okay, just I guess to put this in perspective, yeah. I guess it's not strictly the right position of the law, because as lawyer Badu would bear me out.
Okay, come in here.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just raise the valuation point, and then perhaps you can raise the legal point. So when you value any property up to above 80 years, the value of a freehold and a leasehold are same. So in my experience, when I used to work for the city of Birmingham, they had a policy where land sold in the center of Birmingham city was not going to be freehold. So it is not that it's not done anywhere else. If you go to Hong Kong, your leases are, I think, just about, well, leases now are running up onto 2049, because when the British left, they had to have a new scheme of leaseholds. If you go to Helsinki, if you go to Hawaii, if you go to even some African countries. So it is not as if it's unheard of. It exists, and I guess our point is not perhaps to argue it, but to see what is on our books and how we can make it. Because if you are a foreigner or a non-citizen and you are in Ghana and you come through the investment route, then you are able to actually acquire land because you set up a company, and that company ought to be able to acquire land and do whatever you want to do that would further your aims. But if as an individual you want to buy, that is when you've got the 50-year restriction. But I'll let lawyer Badu come in. Hello.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The good news is the Constitution. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello, Nana.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So the good news is the restriction. Yeah, the restriction is it's not that straight. Okay. Yeah, the law says you can own it. You can own it for 50 years at any one time. So what it presupposes is it is subject to renewal. So you can hold it for a maximum of 50 years. And then when it ends, when the lease ends, you can renew it for another maximum of 50 years. Yeah, so this can be ongoing till maybe both parties decide that, okay, this is it. We are not going to renew anymore. So it becomes quite difficult getting to know the rationale behind this law. Since, of course, it is not to deprive non-citizens from holding land beyond 50 years. You can only hold it for a maximum of 50 years. But when that expires, yeah, you can renew and then continue to hold on to it. So for that is the position of the law. Yeah. So non-citizen can have it for 150 years, but not at a go. It will be 50 years and then another 50 years and so on and so forth, depending on the agreement between the landlord and or the lessor and the lessee. In this case, the landlord and the tenant.
So I guess we have discussed the issue of the non-citizen land acquisition and the citizenship or the stool land situation. I did actually read out what the definition of a stool land is, and it does appear to me that maybe 80% of the lands that are available to sell in Ghana would actually qualify as stool lands. So obviously this branch of landholding is very important and a discussion point which this show would actually take on fully going forward. But I see, for instance, that if you buy land which belongs to a stool, then you have to go through the Lands Commission, and the Lands Commission would have to approve and would have to see that it satisfies the planning regime before they approve it. I have heard in instances in some regions where the Lands Commission has refused to register property because there's no scheme or planning scheme in place. But I guess when you get to that roadblock, you think the system is not working or somebody is just putting impediments in your way. But clearly it is in the law that if you're buying stool land, then it has to go through those channels. So Lawyer Badu, obviously, this is also difficult for the chiefs to achieve. They would want their money quickly to move on to whatever they want to do. And they may not have the money to actually go and lay out and get planners involved and all that. So how do we deal with this? You know, I've bought a piece of land from a chief and the chief hasn't done the planning or layout plans and all that. Why shouldn't I be able to register it? Hello?
This is a situation that must be dealt with by all stakeholders. Okay. When you are buying, and I'm sure Architect Manu will bear me out, when you are buying a land, it's also important for you to know how that land has been zoned for or what it has been zoned for. Yeah. Is it residential? Is it commercial? But unfortunately, people wake up and then they just buy the land and decide to do whatever that they want to do with it. And if it does not conform to the zoning, what of course, the lands commissioner zone it for, it will be very difficult for them to really register because it wouldn't conform to the law. So it's up to us to make sure that before you purchase the land, you know what that land has been zoned for. Is it for commercial? Is it for residential? And so on and so forth. Before you proceed to buy, you don't want to buy it and then now compel the lands commission to rezone it to the land use that you prefer. That then becomes quite difficult. And that's when there will be a roadblock for you in your registration or in your attempt to register the land.
Thank you. I guess, we have been having these discussions on the law relating to our topic as to what land you can buy. And so I would take this to Architect Gyan Manu. Can you tell us, in your professional opinion in dealing with land in Ghana, what you consider to be the prime lands or the lands that you can buy where there is less conflict, or you don't have as many issues as others? Do you have an idea for such lot of lands?
Yeah, thank you, Nana. In my opinion, and also from experience, I wouldn't even say best. I'll say the safest. The safest the piece of properties that you should be interested in going, and if you want less hassle, is government owned and certified government owned lands, which is lands owned by the government, that they are disposing of. That would be number one. Because you're dealing with the government of Ghana, so the credibility, the stability of whatever the institution is established. Yeah. Of course, I recommend that whatever you're doing, get an attorney, and everything that we say here, we are hoping that you're working with an attorney. It's not like, oh, this man said, or me what I say. No, we're hoping you're working with an attorney. Having said that, I think the first or best approach will probably be working with the government or lands owned by the government. The second one would be what I would call certified landowners, meaning real estate developers like Grader. These guys have most often than not done the initial legwork, and lawyer Badu will correct me if I'm wrong. They would have, they've bought large tracts of land. They've dealt with the chiefs, the stew landowners. They've gone through, probably even registered all of these. Especially if you are not living in Ghana and you are outside, like I am here, and you want to buy land and you are not physically there, and won't have the opportunity, apart from once every 3 months or once a year, to go for only 2 or 3 weeks, then your safest best will be to one, seek government lands, lands owned by the government, or land that is certified by a government, people who or institutions that own the land. Sometimes, and the third one would be like SNIT. They would have lands that they are disposing of for due to whatever policies that they have. I encountered something like that. That's why SNIT comes to mind. In the Elmina area. So SNIT has a large piece of land for whatever reason, internal policies. They are moving away from whatever they wanted to do. So they were disposing of, and I'm talking about 70 acres. There's a lot of land, and they're divvying it up. So if you happen to come across something like that, once again, it's the institution. It's SNIT. It's a legitimate institution. They've already probably they own the title, they've registered it already. Working with a lawyer, the lawyer can prepare your documents. You look at these things before the last and group would be the usual route that we go to, going to see your chief and stuff like that. But the first three will be government, certified real estate management and developers, and then what you call other institutions that are letting go of land. But this is all from my experience. I'm sure there's a formal interpretation of that from Lawyer Badu?
So I think just to add on to that, so we're looking at state institutions. You can look at TDC, for instance. It's land and all that is registered already. You're looking at your state housing corporation and those state institutions. You know that at least their title and is not likely to be disputed as opposed to the others. I would tend to Lawyer Bedu then. So which parcels of land should you not touch?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Before I proceed to that, I want to add on to what Architect Manu already mentioned, which is the safest land that you can deal with or transacting in Ghana. It's just like you investing. When it comes to investment, the safest we say is government treasury bill, right? So as you rightly said, your best bet would be to look for the state lands or parastatal, as you mentioned, some of them being the Development Corporation, SNID, and then we also have to add the Lands Commission as well. If you buy it from them, you know that it's one of the safest. Now, to me, what I consider most to be the safest of all has to do with the final judgment by a court of competent jurisdiction regarding land. To me, that is the safest.
Yeah.
If the court, the apex court says, yes, this is the final judgment given in respect of this land, then you are rest assured that once you buy this land from the rightful owner, nobody can take it to court when the court has decided already that these are the rightful owners of the land. So that is to me. And we shouldn't also forget about lands in the Ashanti region. Because of the structure of ownership, transacting in land in the Ashanti region is also one of the best, I must say. And then also transfer of land where you can really trace the root of the title to at least the previous 30 years, and then know that, okay, it passed on from A to B to C and so on and so forth for 30 years. The law says, of course, that is also a very good title and it's worth purchasing. Now, we can also turn attention to look at, areas or land that you need to be extremely careful when you are dealing in it or when you are dealing with it. Number one has to do with the stool lands. When you're buying stool lands, you've got to be very careful because of a double sale, the issue of double sale. Then again, you may have a chief who will sell the land to you without the concurrence, the consent, the concurrence of the elders. The law requires that before that transaction will be valid, the chief, the head of the stool, the chief in this case, must sell it to you with the consent and the concurrence of the elders of the stool. Without that, it is void. It's like you haven't purchased any land at all. So if you go to the chief directly without getting to know that, yes, it is with the consent, that is agreement of all the other elders or principal members of the stool, then you're going to get your fingers burnt if you don't take care. Of course, if we've already discussed this, if a chief tells you that he's selling the stool land and the interest in it is freehold, I think you should run from that transaction because now you can't sell freehold to anybody anymore. Or we can't, sorry, but I need to clarify that it's very important. Freehold titles can be sold or freehold interest can be sold, but not the one which is created or carved out of the stool land. All those who own freehold interest prior to the commencement of the Constitution 1992, or let me be specific, 7th January 1993, all those who own, citizens who own freehold, individuals who own freehold interest in land can still transact in that land. They can sell these freeholds to you or freehold lands to you. But then no new interests in freehold can be created from a stool land as of now. The Constitution bars that. So when you are transacting in stool land, these are some of the things that you need to look at. And then again, like I keep saying, land is not like a tomato where you can go to the market and then say, okay, how much is the price? 50 Ghana cedis. All right, this is my money. Let me take my tomatoes. It's a complex transaction. And before you can really be certain that you are buying it from the rightful person, it's important for you to do your checks, investigate the title. So for instance, if you are buying a leasehold, you need to know that, yes, this is the leasehold. 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 This is the one thing that you need to be sure is what is the unexpired term. Don't forget when we explain it, we said that a leasehold is for a fixed term, a fixed duration, 5 years, 10 years, 99 years. So when you are buying it, you need to be sure. The person will go and show you the land. Oh, this is my land. I'm selling. How much? 100,000 Ghana cedis. You don't need to part with your 100,000 Ghana cedis if you are not sure of the unexpired term. Somebody bought a freehold for so much money, and when later the person went to check, the unexpired term was 10 years. So maybe architect man will bear me. What can you do with 10 years after paying, say, $500,000 for this land? If the person is not going to renew it when the 10 years expire, you would have lost a lot of money in this respect. So that is another thing you need to really look at when you are purchasing land. And of course, if it is leasehold, you also have to be sure that if there is a renewal clause. It's very important, because if there is no renewal clause, then the moment it expires, either your lifetime or your successor's lifetime, it reverts to the original owner, together with any property that is on the land. So you always make sure that you have this covered, that there's a clause for renewal for maybe another 50 years or 99 years and so on and so forth, so that your successors and their successors can take advantage of that to continue to own the land. Now, if an individual also shows you, say, a large tract of vacant land, and then says that this belongs to me, I'm selling it to you. I'm not saying individual cannot own such a land or have title to that. But once you see that, you need to be sure that there's a red flag, and then investigate the title of this person who claims to own this vacant large tract of land, to be sure that indeed he owns it. Because for all you know, it may belong to the stool, it may belong to a family, and then he's just trying to take advantage to sell it to you and dupe you. So these are some of the things that you need to look at for when you are purchasing land. And you also have to be sure that the land that you are buying is not under litigation. How do you determine that? Yeah, that's the way. It's always important to have a lawyer lead you to do the background checks and then investigation. Go to the court registries and then make sure with the details of that land, it is not under any litigation whatsoever. You know what some people to do, those with experience in land, they call it what? Trick other owners or whatever, the term that they use. Once you buy the land, before making full payment, the person will bring some building materials like blocks, sand, and so on and so forth to the land. Hello?
Yeah, we're listening.
Architect Man, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay, then it looks like we are missing our feed from Lawyer Badu. So I think our time is fast running.
Hello?
And so by the time Lawyer Badu comes in, maybe we would skip into the question and answer session. But as I promised at the beginning of the program, obviously we have discussed, Architect Manu has looked at lands that are safe to buy, and Lawyer Badu has attempted to look at lands that you must be cautious when buying. So I'm just going to run through some take-home points from what we have discussed today. So we know that non-citizens can own land up to 50 years at any one time, and that any agreement that goes beyond 50 years is void. Then we also know that there are stool lands, which is about 80% of the lands that are available for sale in Ghana, and that you cannot buy the stool lands on a freehold interest. So we move on to lands that are safe to buy, and the advice has been generally government lands. So you have vested lands, you have lands for Tema Development Corporation, Social Security, National Insurance Trust, state housing, the Lands Commission itself, because they manage the vested lands. And Lawyer Badu also pointed us to final judgment by court. So if there's a land where you have a final judgment, particularly if it is by the Supreme Court, and also the Ashanti region, because they over the years actually have had better management of their land systems. And a lot of the lands that are sold in Ashanti region actually have a layout plan already. You go there and they just give you a plot number. So, you know, it is better managed, I guess, to an extent as compared to other parts of the country. And then he's also mentioned the fact that you should look at lands where you can trace the root of title to at least 30 years. So that is to Lands Commission. But I must mention that when you're going to do a search, it is not always the case that your search would actually find what you're looking for. So the search is just an indicator. If that property has not been registered before, then there'll be nothing there for you to go and find. So just as a general advice, Lawyer Badu's, okay, so you should have you can't buy freehold from a stool land because of what the Constitution says. You can't. You should also be careful with stool lands because of double sales and the fact that you need concurrence from the stool for them to give you a lease. And so if you find any agreement where there's no concurrence, you have to be careful. Then there's also the matter of the unexpired number of years on the lease. So if anybody gives you a lease, you would have to ask them how many years is left on the lease. Then you have where you are, I put on a note that if you're not able to meet the real owners, when you normally have middlemen who are leading you to the owners, you have to be careful. Then there is a point of where there is no renewal clause, because obviously a lease is a wasting asset. It would get to an end at some point, and depending on what you have done with the land, you might want the opportunity to renew at some point. Then he talked about virgin lands or lands that have not been used, and the fact that you have to investigate the title, and also lands that are not under litigation. So those are the pointers that you have to look at in terms of land which you would want to buy and land which you should not buy. As a general advice, I would say do not buy land in a hurry. I think most often than not, we all get rushed into thinking that, you know, this is the only piece of land. We've got more than 84,000 square kilometers available. You might not get what you want, but you definitely get a piece of land somewhere in Ghana. So don't be rushed into buying land, because that is where the traps then come in. As well, if you can, visit the land several times. You know, go there in the morning, in the evening, just see some sort of activity in the area, so you know what you're buying and you know if there are any issues in the area. And this goes generally with buying any piece of property. If you're buying a house in London or Chicago, wherever you are, make sure you go there several times, because, and in Ghana, in sometimes when you get sold a piece of land which is in a riverbed, or because you go there in a dry season and there's no water, but when the rainy season starts, there's a problem. So you have to keep visiting the land to know, you know, what issues there may be. And as well, I normally advise people to look at Google Earth. So if anybody goes to a piece of land, especially for those of you abroad, if you send anybody to go onto the piece of land to look at it for you, tell them to send you the Google location. And with that Google location, you can download Google Earth and you can actually see, pinpoint where that land is. You should be able to then, with the Google Earth, actually tell the history. So you can see clearly, I think Google Earth now would give you up to 2002. You can see clearly what has happened to the land. You could see if somebody had a farm on it at some point, or it's always been fallow, at least from 2002. And that would give you a little bit of an indication as to whether there might be a problem or there wouldn't be a problem. And then you've got, obviously, the issue we have discussed here, that you have to ask if it is freehold or leasehold. Lawyer Badu has told us that if it's freehold, it could have been owned by an individual prior to the coming into effect of the 1992 Constitution. So yes, you clearly can have that. And then also family lands can be sold freehold. So if you have any of those, that's fine. If you don't have that, but the majority of lands that we would get on the market now are leasehold. If you have a leasehold land offered to you, you have to ask them how many years they're going to grant you. If it is a new a bare land which hasn't got any, which hadn't been sold previously. If it has been sold previously, then you have to ask them how much you've got on the lease to run. Because that has been mentioned, you might just have 10 years left and it wouldn't be worth your while, unless, of course, as part of the transaction, you're able to agree with the landlord to extend it. These are pretty much the take-up points, and then the kind of advice, general advice that we can give in relation to this topic. So we would now move on to your questions. And I think our first question, which I think it came from Pius Peterson. So Mr. Peterson is asking, please, if renewal is not explicit in the agreement and your grantor is reluctant to renew, is there any right for the grantee to compel renewal once he is not in breach of any covenant of the lease? I would throw it. My answer is no, you can't. But I would throw it to Lawyer Badu if you can respond to that.
Well, the answer obviously is no, because it's contractual. You understand? There's a privity of contract, privity of estate. When it comes to renewal, that's privity of contract between you and the grantor, as we call it.
Yeah.
So once you put in any renewal clause in it, you can't compel the grantor to renew.
To renew. Okay.
Even though you may have complied with all the covenants in the lease.
Okay. So, Mr. Peterson, I hope you have your question answered. The next one I find is from the real Araba, who is saying, if you are in your 20s and you want to invest in land, where should you start? I guess you should start by saving money. My usual advice is buy cheap and sit tight. Because when you buy, if you're young and you need money, you need to set yourself up. Buy further away from town, buy cheap, make sure you do. And our further shows would show how to buy your land and keep and make sure that nobody takes it away from you, or do the normal kind of idiot's guide to keep the land. So I think that's about it. And I would say as well, it might be helpful for you to pull together with others so that you can, because you may not have enough money, so you can actually get into the market. I don't know if Architect Gyan Manu has something brief to add to that.
I think you've said almost all of it. What I would add to that is going according to what, or as you're following what Nana Otu has said, you still want to, at the back of your mind, even whether you're doing it alone or you're pulling with others, to try to think of what you're going to put on that land. You see, because if you circle back to what Lawyer Stephen Badu said, it's about zoning. It's about, there are other things that determine what you can do with that land. So you are investing in land, but it's not just that you're just going to go buy some lots of acreage and that's it. It goes in tandem with, what am I going to use this land for? What am I going to use this land for? And feel free to dream big. I want to do a Disney center. I want to do, but you have to have something that is going to be on the land, just as opposed to, unless you want to just buy the land and then sit tight, 20, 30 years later, you divvy it up and sell it off. But if you're looking at some real investment, my advice would be, like Nana said, buy early, buy cheap, buy out of the pressure areas, sit tight, but also have some idea of what you want to do what can be done in the future, which also means that you're not talking only to your architect, not only talking to your accountant or your lawyer, but you have some architect friends who can give you some pointers here and there. That's what I'll say.
Okay, then. So the next one, which is a comment, is from Raf Dina, and he is asking, he says, this lease arrangement will cause problems someday. I still don't understand why chiefs are now so interested in granting shorter leases to citizens. So yes, I guess that is an issue which, as a regulatory point, or as we should have a national discussion about it. I personally feel that leases shouldn't be any less than 99 years at least, especially if it is your main residential accommodation. So a lot of people in Ghana build incrementally. So they save money over their working life, and they're most likely going to build when they've gone into retirement. Now, if you only got a 50-year lease, as pertains in the Ashanti region, and I understand that some private lands around East Legon are also on offer for 50 years, and I think I'm sure that the lands to the east of the trade fair site are also being offered initially for a 50-year term and then a further 44-year term. But this is a conversation that we must have as a nation in terms of deciding what the standard is, because it may very well come to the point where somebody would offer 20-year lease and consider it reasonable, because you know it's a choice and it's what they decide. So yes, we would have to look at that. Thank you for the comment, Rafi. I have another comment. So I guess I will throw this to Mr. Badu. He says, what about lands that you pay a fee every year? I'm not particularly clear what that question is alluding to, but I guess it might be more of licenses or perhaps in leases and
another quick one I'll add to it.
Yeah. Yeah, we are listening to you. Hello? Okay, I think we're not hearing Lawyer Steve. So I'll go on to look at the next question.
So no, I didn't hear you. There was a break in the audio.
Okay, fine. So I guess I'll throw this to you then. It says, if you set up a Ghanaian legal entity,
yeah,
there's
I can hear you now. Is there a question?
Yeah, so the question on the screen now, if you set up a Ghanaian legal entity, does ownership restrictions also apply to that entity? Should that entity must be controlled by a Ghanaian? So I guess, Lawyer Steve, can you answer that? Okay, I think we are having troubles with
that. Your partner Ghanaian. You can hold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so you cannot wholly own an entity as a foreigner. You need to really partner Ghanaian.
Okay, I guess I have to make an intervention there. I think that you can, but I think is that the threshold of investment is higher if you are a non-citizen, and I think it is through the Ghana Investment Promotion Center. So there are elements where you have to go into partnership with a Ghanaian, and the threshold for your financial investment is lower. But I think there is 100% non-citizenship ownership as well. But you have to go through the Ghana Investment Promotion Center for that one. The next question that we have is, are there any formal agreements with automatic renewals for a minimum of, say, 2 to 3 terms, guaranteed renewals? I haven't seen such leases, but I guess it is not beyond the will of man to have it that way. But the question I would ask, you know, as a legal person is, what are you trying to prevent, or what are you trying to create? If you are happy to give the person, say, a term of 150 years, why do you break it down into 3 50-year terms? Unless you actually want to do something, you know, unless you want to take it back, there's no point. Just give them 150 years straight away. So in the case of obviously a non-citizen, this becomes, but the law says it is 50 years at any one time. So if you have an automatic renewal, then technically it adds up automatically. And so you're actually getting 150 years rather than getting a 50-year lease at any one time. So that is with that. I have got another question from Mr. Peterson, who says, is there any regulation on renewal in Ghana, especially on determining the consideration in renewals? I foresee a chaotic situation in the near future, especially stool and family lands. Okay, so my answer is no. There's no regime at the moment, but I don't know if Mr. Badu would add something to it.
No, absolutely. There's no regulation on renewal at the moment. That's why I keep saying you have to insist, because this contractual, it is what has been reduced into writing. So whilst you are preparing the lease document or agreement, insist on this renewal. because no law will come in and then intervene to say, oh, okay, look, it's automatic. We have to renew it. No, you have to insist that if it's given to you for 50 years, then after 50 years, I need it for another 50 years, and so on and so forth. Without it, no law can intervene to save you on that.
Okay, so the next question is, what is the pathway to citizenship? Can I try to get citizenship before the end of the lease and transform mine to a full ownership? I think that's a very intelligent question. I will throw it to Stephen, but I'm just thinking that if you get a lease, obviously it's a matter for your it's a contractual relationship. So you came in as one person and you have changed. I guess it would be advisable to change before you actually get that. But if you do get it and you change, well, I guess it's a conversation between you and your landlord. I couldn't say, and no law would force them to say, because you've changed your citizenship, now I'll give you. And as well, we have to mention that there are leases for 50 years that are now being sold to citizens. So it is not as if non-citizens are being discriminated against or they are getting anything less than citizens. So, you know, even a citizen will be in the same boat as well. And after the 50 years, I guess it's how nice you are to your landlord that determines whether you get it renewed. So, Mr. Badu. Okay, I'll throw it to Architect Manu then.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really intelligent one. But I'll look at it from the point of view of architecture. It's like coming to me for me to design a 10, 20-story structure for you. We've designed it. We're on our way. You know, there's quite the process. And right in the middle of the process, you say, no, we're not going to do the hotel anymore. We want to use the structure to do for a school or something. It can be done, but I'm sure it's gonna put a what do you call it, a cog in the wheel. It's gonna make it a little bit murky. You know, I think that especially with land, you want to be very clear. You know, finished one term, and then when you're ready, you know, you
get another one.
or become a citizen before you buy it. But in the middle of the lease, trying to change it, I don't know. It's going to be problematic.
It's another thing. Okay, so I guess our time is running out. You know,
hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Badu, yes, we are
Yes,
listening.
I think he asked the question as to what the pathway is to. Okay, he asked the question as to what the pathway is to citizenship. Yeah, if you're foreign now, there are ways, you know, you can become citizen. But in relation to this, the question will be: at the time that you were granted the lease, were you a citizen or not? If you were not, you can't transform it to something else because you become a citizen by way of a naturalization and so on and so forth. So that would be my answer to that.
Okay, so the last question is also from the same person and says, is there a difference in price between lease for non-citizens and full ownership for citizens? And my question is that surprisingly, the Ghanaian property market does not seem to be able to or does not differentiate between even leaseholds and freeholds. So you can buy a freehold at the same price as a leasehold, and then you ask yourself why. And I guess that is why some of us are encouraged to put this program up, because we have to be aware of the value of what we are buying. Because traditionally we have evolved where when you buy land, you own it absolutely. We have not actually looked at the fact that the document in front of us actually has a different implication or has a different right, a bundle of rights for us. And so, no, the prices are pretty much the same. You can buy 1 acre of freehold land for 20,000 Ghana cedis and buy another acre of leasehold land for the same 20,000 Ghana cedis, perhaps even within the same vicinity. So thank you very much. I don't have any other questions, but if there are any other questions, we would deal with that. If we have any further questions, I guess we will deal with that later on our Facebook feed or on the website, so you can follow on, so we can keep within our limit. So thank you very much. Architect Gyan Manu for joining us today. It's been very helpful. And then Lawyer Badu. I know the internet hasn't been our best friend today, but you know, we have been able to still move through. On a general note, if you have any more detailed inquiry to come to us, please send it to info@landpropertyfocus.com. The website is a holding page now, but if you do send us your email and as well, we would be able to keep you up on our mailing list so that we would periodically, because as it is, we do have the Land Act, which has been passed by Parliament. I think it hasn't received assent yet. So it's one of the things that going forward, we will be discussing, because there are very important parts that would affect almost every Ghanaian, and we have to look through to that. For all those who in diverse ways helped to make this maiden program a success, and for all of you who have watched on Facebook and YouTube and have made comments today, thank you very much for joining us. We hope you keep faith with us, and you know, going forward, we would all be able to have a discussion, learn, and then be empowered to face any questions that relates to the land and property sector in Ghana. So thank you very much.
Thank you.